measure to end property taxes in North Dakota.
Will also get to decide whether to end property tax.
Told you how the North Dakota primary residence credit is causing issues for homeowners.
Eric Peterson, proven realty broker by eXp. I'm sitting here with my good friend Steve Kemp. We're going to be talking specifically about the North Dakota property tax elimination referendum. He mentioned this at our last mastermind meeting, and it was really insightful. And I said, you know what, we need to get you on video to help you educate the public so that they are not left out in the dark, and that they can make some really good informed decisions. So thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Really excited to have you here. Not many local Williston natives around.
Well, yeah, I think I'm in a minority, but that's fine.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about what your background is, go into your responsibilities as county commissioner, and then let's dive into specifically what's happening at the state level that we should all know about.
Yeah, just a little bit about me. I'm a lifelong Williston resident, a longtime business owner in town, and as of 2016, a Williams County Commissioner and running for my third term right now. This property tax measure came up, and it's an important thing that we need to talk about. And as you mentioned in the mastermind meeting, it was a prevalent part of the discussion. And so I think some eyes maybe got opened as to what the reality of what this means is, because there's very few people in the world that would love nothing more than to not have to pay property tax.
You and me both.
Yes,
right.
Of course, and if you own any property at all, not much different than Mr. Becker, who's championed this idea. I think owns a fair amount of property himself, and so would certainly seem to benefit from this as well. But the interesting part of this that I find most interesting is that Mr. Becker often refers to as, he's tired of the corporate welfare within the state, and specifically targeting the North Dakota Department of Commerce as, an economic development arm of the state of North Dakota, giving out money to corporate entities to locate here. This particular measure, I'm going to pull up, we have some numbers, so I want to make sure I get them right. And one of the things that eliminating property tax does is it eliminates the centrally assessed utilities. Those are things that Williams County doesn't per se value or figure out the numbers on. There's a central agency that figures this out, but there's things like the Hess North Dakota Pipeline LLC currently pays about $3.1 million in property tax.
And that's per year?
That's per year. And so
Wow.
You talk about a corporate welfare program for Hess Pipelines. And then you have the Hess Tioga Gas Plant, that's about $2.735 million per year. Again, Hess, being the leader of the pack, is being the recipient of a massive corporate welfare. And so these numbers are large numbers, and we all know what we may pay if you own property here. You're going to pay whatever you pay. But these are substantially larger than what I'm paying, and I know the impact it would have for me as well. But this is a tremendous impact for a corporate entity, and there's 25. The top 25 property taxpayers in Williams County alone are $74.368 million is what that adds up to be. Now, it's important, I want to point this out. It's the top 25 taxpayers net of special assessments in Williams County for the tax year 2023.
Okay.
Just so that we're laying it out there accurately.
And where can somebody get a hold of this list? Is it online somewhere?
I'm not 100% sure if it's online, but it can be gotten by request from Williams County through the communications department.
And with this video, we'll add the link to that, so that way you guys could just click the link and then pull that up so that you know exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So centrally assessed utilities include people like North Dakota Pipelines, then there's BNSF. So you want to just hand Warren Buffett a big fat check for
the biggest investor of all time.
Exactly. Let's just give him a free ride through North Dakota. So that's one critical component about the whole thing. And all of this to say, I want to make sure people understand that there's plenty of room for property tax reform, and let's talk about those things. Let's implement those as reforms. But this feels a lot like just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It is lacking a lot of detail in how to move forward. And one of those details is whatever our assessment is this year will be what we're locked in at going forward. So the money that the state has to come up with, this $3.15 billion that comes through property tax throughout the state of North Dakota, has to be made up, and then but it doesn't necessarily change. So the state's locked in at that dollar amount, But we have things like, cost of living wage increases. We have, we might need more services. We might need an extra sheriff's deputy on staff. But we're going to have to let somebody else go somewhere else in order for that to happen. Or we have to raise fees, which is this whole new concept of instead of paying property taxes, we'll just pay fees. Well, none of that's defined. It's all wide open, and nobody really knows how that's going to work. And so I feel like it's just putting lipstick on a pig, because you're just basically taking it from calling it property tax to now you're calling it a fee. And the counties have to make up, and the cities and all school districts have to make up for those dollars some way. So you just transplant the word property tax for fee. And then is that fee going to be fairly implemented? How does that work? I mean, how are people going to be affected by that? So the problems I have are, it seems like there's many more questions than answers. And if you were to ask me my personal opinion, it would seem that this was a good campaign slogan for somebody running for public office.
Sure.
And that would be what I would suggest. This was maybe part of his campaign efforts. I don't know. That's just me looking in from the outside. But the other scary part of this, from a funding perspective, or where is the money going to come from, is within the state of North Dakota for extraction tax and then gross production tax. Each one is 5%. For a total of 10% oil tax, and 5 of that percent was given in lieu of property tax, and that's the gross production tax.
Yep.
So the interesting thing about the gross production tax is that there's already very strong rumors of several oil companies looking to sue the state to eliminate. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because this tax was created in lieu of property tax.
Yep.
So if property tax goes away, then this should, right?
And we would lose that. We, the people of North Dakota.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
And to give you an example, one of the things that pays for is social services throughout the entire state of North Dakota. A few years back, the state took over social services and created zones, and Williams County is part of a zone. And they used gross production tax dollars to pay for that, so that we could alleviate that portion of the tax that was previously being raised by property tax. So Williams County no longer had to pay that. That was coming out of gross production tax.
Right.
So our little area of northwest North Dakota is creating this great revenue stream by having oil and gas being produced here to feed the coffers of the entire state and help out every single county within the state by paying for social services. And so things like that are just they're suddenly unfunded.
Right.
And you have to provide those services. And we've taken great pride over the years in taking care of our own. We don't need help from other people. We just take care of our own people and take care of the problems right here, right now. We're going to have a handout from somebody to be able to pay for this.
And fill in the gap.
Absolutely.
And to pay for things that are currently covered by the property taxes and other funding sources.
Absolutely. Right? And so it is, there's just so many gaps in the understanding of how things are going to work going forward. So I feel like this is a detailed enough elimination of property tax to fill in the void that's created when that goes away. Now, I think there's ample room again to talk about reform of property tax. But again, I can use a personal experience story to share how things work. At one point in time, we had a property in Florida. It was valued the same as our house in North Dakota. And our property tax was 4 times higher than it was in North Dakota.
Crazy.
But you know what? Guess what? Florida doesn't have income tax.
Sure.
So yeah, you saved on your income tax, but guess what? You make up for it somewhere else.
You absolutely do. And on that note, a quick story of mine. I'm from Missoula, so not where you're from, Missoula, Montana. Built a house there. It was our dream home. First tax was $3,800. They just kept taxing and taxing. When we sold that a couple years ago, it was $13,000 a year.
Wow.
And now if you look at nationally what's happening, specifically in Florida, there's a lot of people walking away from their houses. There's about 10 million, the news came out yesterday, that are currently behind on their mortgage because property taxes and insurance went through the roof.
Absolutely.
Some people that have been in those houses, especially retirees on fixed incomes, can no longer pay those, and so they have to walk away from their houses with nowhere to go, or they just can't afford to pay their mortgage. And we certainly don't want to turn into a welfare society here.
Absolutely not.
Right? So how does that go as far as, if you've been following politics the last 3 or 4 years, there hasn't been a plan nationally, right? Even if you've been looking at the debates the last couple of weeks, there is no plan on what they should do. It seems like that national, as vague as you can, just to get the votes and tell people what you want, has not led to good results. If you look at inflationary pressures, interest rates, our global economy is as weak as it's been in a decade at least. So that's what I'm concerned about, what's happening here. And that's why I thought it was imperative to get you in here so that we could have a conversation and help educate voters. Okay?
Well,
so nobody wants to pay tax, but why should they?
Absolutely.
And why is this important that we keep the taxes that we've all agreed to and that we're used to?
Absolutely. And I think it's right to set the stage of what is fair and how much have we been paying and what you paid in Montana versus here. And guess what? Montana doesn't have a sales tax, right? So yay, you don't have a sales tax, but guess what? The government needs the money to fund and operate the services they provide.
Of course.
But the big picture for us is that if we lose our competitive, what I would call our competitive edge right now, and that is the fact that we do have a state that's got a lot of money in the bank, which also is the frustration for the folks that want to get rid of and eliminate property tax, right? So you have the over $10 billion sitting there that can't be accessed, and that's constitutionally can't be accessed. So it's not as though the legislators are saying, hey, let's just keep building this nest egg, because constitutionally it's got to go that way. So fair enough. Then, but what that does is that we get to use those earnings on that, some of the interest off of those dollars, to help promote North Dakota as a great place to invest. There's a reason that we have $60 billion in potential projects sitting and waiting to potentially come to North Dakota. So that's pretty exciting. And when in our history have we ever talked about that large of an opportunity sitting out in front of us?
We have the best coffers in the state. I don't know, in the country as a state. I don't know anybody else that has a $10 billion plus legacy fund. And then all of the new infrastructure that's coming in and all these exciting projects in our area. We're going to have another video on that, so I'm going to hold you to that. But you and I could talk all day about the exciting developments that are happening here and all the money that's going back in, which on a national scale, we are now getting investors, powerhouse investors that we haven't seen in over a decade, that we went from the redheaded stepchild of the country, when we crashed in 14, 15, COVID again hit us and oil was negative $38 a barrel. All of that now has turned the corner. The economy is showing weakness again, and North Dakota is now one of the few bright spots, not only in the country, but in the world to invest.
Absolutely.
So what would you tell those people that says, we have a $10+ billion bank account for the state, we just saw our property taxes go up in the last year or two, significantly, and insurance rates and the cost of living and all this other stuff that's trickled down. What would you tell them about the families that are here that have these budgets that they can't afford to pay anymore, and that this would be a good short-term reprieve?
Well, a short-term reprieve often leads to irresponsible behavior, And so just like you tell your kids, go ahead and watch as much TV as you want, I'm tired, I'm wore out, I've been working all day, I don't have the energy left in me to, so here's your reprieve, go ahead and watch TV. Usually, or go out in the streets and do whatever you're gonna do, I mean, it's responsible and conservative, and it's our core values of the people of the state. We're not just North Dakota nice, but we're responsible with our money. And I think that's been a real negative message that Mr. Becker has been putting out, is that we're irresponsible with our funds. And I couldn't disagree with him more. We're just a very down-to-earth, very conservative way of thinking, and we're going to use those funds responsibly. So I think the folks that are looking for that, that rest or break from having to pay property tax, I think the responsible way would be to go forward and look at property tax as a whole and make the adjustments that are necessary. Now, the legislature has started that with the $500 tax credit. And I think they can do more, And so they have a very conservative approach, and that's great. So we try this much, and then next time we can build it up a little bit more. And I think there's a way to get this through a much more stepped approach, as opposed to just again, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and
Yep.
then trying to figure out how we're going to do everything after the baby's outside. And oh, by the way, it's 40 below zero,
Right.
and soaking wet, and no clothes on. So,
Right.
so yeah, I think that's we just have to walk through this carefully and do it in a staged approach and see where the best solution lies.
And that makes sense. And in my opinion, it's not broken now. Even though our property taxes are higher than anybody wants to pay, I'm with you.
Right.
I own multiple properties here as well. I hate paying taxes just like the next guy. But at least in my scenario with my real estate, commercial and industrial buildings, the tenant pays said taxes.
Right.
So it's
you can pass that off.
It's a pass through to the actual tenant, the oil field companies. I think that's a really good way to do it.
Right.
Unfortunately, not everybody could do that with their single family house and everything else that they're in.
Yeah.
Can you describe the 2023 statewide reduction of property taxes? And we just had one of the biggest property tax cuts in all of North Dakota history, and also one of the biggest in the nation. That was just last year.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And people already forgot about it. So explain that and why, because of that, we don't need to eliminate them entirely.
Right, and I think it'd be important too to put a link
Sure.
for if people haven't applied for it. Now, I'm curious if that deadline has passed, but you want to make sure to apply. If you own property in North Dakota, you can apply to get that $500 tax credit.
Yep.
And I have a worry that not everybody's doing it, right?
Lack
And
of
so-
education
yeah,
again, and why
absolutely.
we're here today.
And people are trying to get the message out, but not everybody's looking to the government
Sure.
for their information source, right? So we have to do these sorts of things to get the word out. But I think that's number one, is make sure the people have the link to be able to get online and sign up for that tax
Yep.
credit. And I think that's the targeted approach that the legislature has kind of looked at as, okay, if the $500 worked and it didn't impact anything too terribly, let's bump that up.
Yep.
And so that's just one mechanism. And again, there could be other ways. There could be other better ways. And I'm not advocating for one way over another, but that's the way they chose. And I have a tendency to believe that they're doing it the right way, I think. The most important part is to reach out to your legislators. And that's one unique advantage that we have in North Dakota as well, is that you're so close to people that are running the government. You're never very far away. I mean, we were just at a fundraiser for the governor. I mean, he's standing 5 feet away from you. And in what other state do you have that opportunity to be able to have those conversations?
And additionally, to put in a plug for you, you are on his governor's housing committee for North Dakota.
You bet.
To help encourage affordable housing for our great residents, and you're representing our area. Right?
Yes.
So in addition to obviously being on that committee, to be able to see him at these fundraising events, and he was down as the keynote speaker at the big Watford City Economic Summit here.
Yeah.
I was down there as well. He gave an amazing speech on the health of North Dakota and how we need to revitalize our downtown areas,
Yep.
and how we all need to work in this together, and all of the things that we're progressively doing that nobody else in the country is doing.
Absolutely.
To take care of our own and to use this money wisely and be as conservative as possible was really the message.
Right.
And I really liked what he had to say about all the programs that they're rolling out behind the scenes that we may not know of.
Right.
So it just seems that in this particular approach, it's short-sighted.
Yeah.
That they're picking on one easy, low-hanging fruit because everybody hates property taxes,
Yes.
right?
It's universally hated,
Yeah,
yes.
everybody from the minute you own property, you hate property taxes, right? It's a
Right.
necessary evil. But again, if we're going to pay our taxes somehow, it's the most equitable to me,
Right.
especially as the oil field companies are carrying their weight.
Of course.
And more specifically, the rail companies,
Yeah.
the Berkshire Hathaways of the world, and
The
Warren-
Walmarts.
yeah, all of them, right? They're going to pay their share of taxes at a much higher level so that the burden doesn't fall on us.
Absolutely.
But let's just talk about, put in your crystal ball, what happens if this thing does get passed? It could be a detriment. What does that look like for the average person here in Williams County?
Well, they won't pay property tax anymore.
Right.
But they're going to have to make up for that somewhere. And so my guess is the likely targets are going to be, because again, keep in mind that we believe that gross production tax is going away as well.
Yep. So we're
because
talking billions now,
Yes.
not hundreds of millions.
Exactly. And so the fiscal impact to Williams County is about $40 million as of
Okay.
last year. We'll see where it ends up being this year, but that's the dollars that we get from gross production tax.
Yep.
And so that's a big gap for Williams County to fill. Now, the state's supposed to pay us for what we lose or what we levy right now.
Okay.
But I can tell you what we levy versus what we get through gross production tax.
Okay.
There's a
Gap.
massive
Right.
gap. We would have to increase fees for everything that you can think of. But I think from a statewide perspective, there's still a gap, and it's a $3.15 billion gap. And the easiest place to target is sales tax.
Yep.
So your sales tax is going to go up. Of
course.
And so that's going to be across the board for everybody. That will somewhat hit the oil companies back a little bit because there is a lot of sales tax they pay on proppant and frac sand, whatever. So that is a large revenue generator for Williams County in particular. But is that really how we want to be able to hit those people? And if you have to buy clothing for 5 kids at home, and suddenly you went from 8% to 10 or 11 or 12% sales tax. I mean, so you're getting it from one side or the other.
And on that note, think about all the people here that are in rentals.
Yeah.
We have one of the highest rental rates here as a part of the percentage of the overall pie.
Right.
We have way more rental properties than actual individual property owners.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's going to impact at our local level a far greater magnitude of people than it would in other parts of the state, if not the country.
Well, you just made me think of something else. What motivation is the apartment property owner going to have to lower his rent,
Not at all.
his or her rent,
Right.
based on the fact that they're no longer paying property tax?
None.
Yeah.
They're just going to keep it jacking
So-
them up based on market rates.
So talk about corporate welfare again,
Yeah.
because a lot of corporations own the apartment complexes. There's a lot of individuals that do as well. But again, there's going to be zero motivation for them to lower the rent based
Right.
on the fact that they're no longer paying property tax. So it's really going to hit people in a lot of different ways, and it's going to be kind of a buckshot theory because you're going to have to fire at as many different potential revenue sources as you can to make up the gap that we know will exist. And so,
And these are the same people that the last 3 or 4 years, inflation's gone through the roof at
Right.
double digits,
Right.
So everybody's been reeling for paying a lot more. Insurance went up, life went up, every single thing that you did. And oh, by the way, the cost to borrow has doubled or tripled.
absolutely.
Right? So I now want to buy a house to then be an affordable homeowner. Guess what? I've got double the rates, 2.5 times what they used to be, and a lot higher cost to live.
And we should talk about insurance and what's gone on. And we had a massive hailstorm that came through Williston in particular.
Yep.
And I think every roof in town has been replaced. And that, it's not just free, right?
Right.
There's no free lunch. And Florida's seen the same thing with the hurricanes and everything else and the flooding. And that's why their insurance has gone up so much. And so we're just seeing that across the board. And I think, there's got to be an off-ramp at some point. But the insurance companies have to be solvent, right? They can't just give money away they don't have. So we saw a dramatic increase just in we went from one house to another. And it was 4 times more expensive for the insurance.
Yep.
And that was kind of mind-blowing, something we hadn't been planning on. And so that was a kick in the butt. But that's the way the world works, unfortunately, right now. But, to summarize that whole concept of, do we cut back on this property tax to make ourselves feel good? Because you're voting for yourself if you own property.
Of course, it's the most selfish thing you can do, right?
Absolutely. But you've also just voted for the biggest corporate tax welfare system ever devised.
Right.
Because you have eliminated all the pipeline companies from paying centrally assessed utilities.
Yep.
You've eliminated BNSF. You've eliminated Walmart from participating, and that money gets made up for somewhere. And guess where it comes from? It comes from
All
the
of
people
us,
and the
right.
businesses and the commercial operations that live here
Yep.
and operate here and are headquartered here.
Yep.
If they're not headquartered here, they're laughing all the way to the bank.
Of
They're
course.
like, I hope North Dakota passes this because then we got a
Right.
free lunch. And so I think again, we have to focus on the responsible fixing of property tax and not just eliminating it altogether. Let's fix it before, and if we can't fix it, then that's when
right.
your opportunity is to measure for the heck out of this thing, right?
Sure. And I would say more than anything, we have elected officials that we've given the responsibility to represent our best interest, to vote accordingly, to support us, and more importantly, come back with saying, hey, watch out for these things.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know this is an issue. Didn't even know it was on the thing. I'm just doing my thing with my blinders on like
Right.
everybody else.
Well, everybody's busy, right?
Yeah.
And if anybody takes the time to watch this, good on them for educating themselves, or at least seeing another perspective of this. And they can educate themselves by watching whatever they want to watch, or reading whatever they want to read, and believing whatever they want to believe.
Sure.
And they vote with confidence then. At least they've understood the measure. I would highly recommend personally, as my personal opinion, that people vote no on this, to provide us with the competitive advantage, especially as we're looking at the nation as a whole and the world as a whole. North Dakota's primed to absolutely become the center of attention for the world. And we already kind of are. I mean, with operations like Saralon and some of the other opportunities we've talked about, it's amazing the possibilities that we have coming. All of which have been helped along in some effort through economic development, North Dakota Department of Commerce, somebody reaching out to these the governor himself, reaching out to these companies and providing incentives. And just as an example, when Saralon was looking to come to North Dakota versus Oklahoma, Louisiana, or any myriad of other potential locations, they had a $500 million incentive package from Oklahoma.
Wow. And still chose here.
And still chose here with far less in incentives. But they were smartly done incentives. They were not just blank checks. They were intended to entice them to come here very purposefully, knowing full well we couldn't compete with $500 million in incentives. Are you kidding me? But so I my hat's off to the Department of Commerce and how they put that program together to attract that business to come here. And then couple that with the fact that we've got fantastic electrical infrastructure. We have abundant energy through natural gas, the potential of turning natural gas into electrons and creating electricity with all this abundant natural gas, which is important because at some point we're going to hit a point where we can't ship any more natural gas out of the area. So we won't get into too many more details on that, but we're really primed for the pump. To be a world-class place of innovation and investment. And if we eliminate property tax, it just takes that competitive advantage
and
away.
Hamstrings us, cuts off our nose to spite our face.
100%.
That would be a huge risk that I would worry about. Is, are we then going to be able to do all the great things that we want to do and be able to be proactive with some of these business opportunities and investment opportunities that are coming in? Or are we going to be spending all of our time, effort, resources, plugging all the holes? And all the bleeding that's going to happen on that level, personal, state, everything.
100%, and I want to bring this up, and I know this is from an economic development perspective, but it's of critical importance, and that people understand that gross production tax was created to replace property tax for oil and gas companies as they're producing in the state of North Dakota. It became a central repository for them to pay taxes to. It simplified the process. I understand that that's what the intention was, but what that has done is for our schools that are severely impacted in McKenzie County, Williams County, and Montreal County, and Dunn County, where you have this massive influx of people coming in and having their kids come with. God bless them. We talked about the schools closing, a couple decades ago, and now here we are with record enrollment. What we haven't had is industrial participation in the property tax side of things. And what we're just starting to get is some larger industrial opportunities to help participate in property tax without necessarily impacting, thousands more kids at the schools with maybe 100 or a couple hundred, but having these this massive influx of capital potential in property tax that they would participate in. Take some of that load off of our back with regards to schools, and schools are typically the largest portion of your property tax. And to have some industrial participation on that side of things will make a huge impact on us personally for paying property tax.
But you think back to a decade ago when this thing really started booming and growing, a lot of the infrastructure that we had that came in was paid by these sources.
Absolutely.
Think about the ARC.
Yes.
That would never have happened without property tax to then fill in the hole. They would have used that money to pay for social services and all the other essentials that we're getting now. Think about the new schools coming in, the infrastructure, all that other stuff that they're putting back into the community, imagine what we could do now when all these big dogs show up.
Right.
We continue to tax them and they pay their share. It's just going to open up a whole bunch of opportunities for quality of life here.
Right.
And I don't think that people that are in this like, hey, how am I going to pay all my bills, think about that long-term projection.
Absolutely.
And that's why we encourage every single one of them to get out, be educated, and vote the right way.
100%.
Anything else in summary you want to add before we let you go?
I think that covers it. I think we did a good job
Good.
there, and hopefully that at least created some questions in people's minds that they want to get further answers on.
And that's what it's all about. We'll provide the links down there below. I want to thank Steve Kemp for coming in today to help educate us. When you came in and told us about this at our mastermind, there was 10 people that were like, eyes glazed over. We're like, we're not listening about this. We all want lower property tax. Very similar to several months ago when the school bond situation came to the forefront in that very group.
Yeah.
And we made another similar video to that to help educate, and it passed.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
every single person that I've talked about have said, wow, I didn't realize that was the impact on our schools and hiring employees and really creating a community that's here for the long term. So hopefully it helped. But again, Steve Kemp, looking to vote against that referendum for property taxes in November, on the 5th of November, right?
Yes.
5th of November, get out, have your voice heard, and vote yourself. If you liked what you heard today, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel so we can create more content like this to help educate you, focus on the community, and what else we could do to make this a place for everybody. Other than that, thanks again, sir.
Thank you.